Most people fear being alone. But what if solitude was not something to avoid, but something to seek? What if the silence you run from holds the clarity and strength you've been missing? In this video, we invite you into a quiet yet powerful journey across time and thought. Through the minds of great thinkers like Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Thoreau, Frankl, Jung, and Peterson, you'll discover how solitude isn't emptiness, it's a space for growth, self-reflection, and emotional mastery. You'll learn why stepping away from the noise of the world may be the most courageous and transformative act of your life. So take a breath, slow down, and watch closely. This is not just a video. This is a call to turn inward, and become more than what the world tells you to be. The journey begins now. Definition and perspectives on loneliness and stillness. Have you ever found yourself sitting alone in the quiet, with nothing but the sound of your breath and the presence of your thoughts? In that moment, a strange tension rises. For many, solitude feels unfamiliar, even threatening. We live in a world that never stops moving. One that demands our attention with 1,000 notifications and endless noise. To sit still is to resist. To be alone is to confront a space most people spend their lives avoiding. But what exactly is solitude? Is it simply the absence of people, or is it something deeper? Loneliness is often mistaken for solitude. They may look alike from the outside, but inside, they are worlds apart. Loneliness is a craving. It is the ache for connection that feels out of reach. Solitude, in contrast, is a choice. It is a sacred retreat into the self, where distraction fades and clarity begins. Stillness does not mean weakness. Being alone does not mean being lost. These quiet moments are not signs of isolation, but invitations to listen. Not to the world, but to yourself. And in that listening, you may find the beginnings of mastery over your emotions. You may notice your anxiety soften, your stress loosen its grip. You begin to observe rather than react. You start to think clearly, without pressure, without urgency. Decision becomes direction. Calm becomes clarity. True solitude is not about escaping the world. It is about returning to the only place you truly have power, your own mind. When the noise fades, what remains is the truth. And sometimes, it takes silence to hear it. So next time you find yourself alone, do not rush to fill the space. Stay. Listen. It might be the first step toward inner freedom. Friedrich Nietzsche, solitude as a condition for achieving greatness. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that greatness is not born in comfort or conformity. It is forged in solitude. To him, the crowd represents safety, but also mediocrity. It rewards obedience and punishes deviation. Those who seek to rise above must be willing to step away from it. Solitude is not just a physical separation. It is an inner stance. A decision to stand alone even when it is painful. Nietzsche saw solitude as essential for self-overcoming. He argued that only in silence, away from the distractions of the herd, can a person truly hear their own thoughts. Without solitude, there is no clarity. Without clarity, there is no transformation. The journey to becoming oneself, he said, demands courage. And that courage begins in solitude. One of Nietzsche's most powerful ideas is the distinction between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a state of lack. Solitude is a state of presence. Loneliness feels empty. Solitude feels full. It is in solitude that we reclaim ownership over our lives. We stop measuring ourselves by others. We begin to ask better questions. What do I want? What matters to me? Who am I willing to become? Nietzsche warned that this path is not easy. To separate from the crowd is to risk fear, discomfort, and doubt. But he believed the price is worth paying. Because the reward is authenticity. It is the rare privilege of owning yourself completely. Solitude, then, is not withdrawal. It is a path forward. A confrontation with the self that leads to power, clarity, and depth. Greatness demands a kind of inner independence. And that independence is born in solitude. So if you find yourself standing alone, do not rush to return. Stay. Lean into the silence. That space may hold the beginning of the truest version of who you are. Soren Kierkegaard, discovering the true self through separation. Soren Kierkegaard believed that truth is not found in the crowd but in the individual. His philosophy centers on the idea that a true self is the highest goal a person can pursue. But this journey is not one of comfort. It is a solitary path. For Kierkegaard, solitude is not optional. It is essential. Without it, we risk living a life shaped by others rather than one shaped by authentic choice. Kierkegaard saw the crowd as a force that dilutes individuality. In the presence of many voices and opinions, we often lose sight of our own. We adopt the values of the group without questioning them. We chase approval instead of truth. In doing so, we abandon ourselves. To truly become who we are, he argued, we must step away. We must create distance between ourselves and the noise of collective expectation. Solitude, in Kierkegaard's view, is where we encounter our anxieties and fears without distraction. It is the space where we wrestle with doubt, despair, and meaning. These are not obstacles. They are signposts. They point us inward. They force us to ask the questions that matter. What is my purpose? What do I believe? How do I live in alignment with that belief? This kind of solitude is not passive. It demands courage. To be alone with yourself and not look away takes strength. Kierkegaard believed that it is only in this space of isolation that we begin to hear the truth of who we are. We are no longer echoing others. We are finally speaking from within. He famously wrote that the more one isolates oneself, the closer one comes to oneself. In solitude, we strip away what is not real. We see what remains. And in that seeing, something extraordinary happens. We begin to live not as a copy, but as an original. To walk this path is to accept responsibility for your own existence. It is to live deliberately, not reactively. It is to build a life rooted not in the crowd but in conviction. And that begins the moment you choose to step away. Henry David Thoreau, living simply in nature to uncover truth. Henry David Thoreau did not just speak about solitude. He lived it. In 1845 he built a small cabin by Walden Pond and withdrew from society for over 2 years. But this was not an escape. It was an experiment. Thoreau wanted to discover what was essential in life. What remains when we strip away the unnecessary noise, obligations, and expectations that often shape our days. For Thoreau, solitude in nature was not isolation. It was reconnection. Surrounded by trees and silence, he found space to think clearly. The distractions of social life fell away. What replaced them was clarity. He was no longer reacting to the world. He was listening to it. And more importantly, listening to himself. Thoreau wrote that he went to the woods because he wished to live deliberately. To front only the essential facts of life. To him, most people were sleepwalking. Their lives were dictated by routine and outside approval. Solitude offered a chance to wake up. To ask what it truly means to live. In this space, he practiced simplicity, observation, and reflection. These were not luxuries. They were disciplines. Practices that sharpened his mind and brought peace to his emotions. His days were slow but not empty. He worked with his hands, walked among the trees, and wrote with focus. This rhythm grounded him. And in that grounding, he found resilience. Stress lost its grip. Noise faded. Clarity deepened. Thoreau believed that solitude in nature could heal. It could strip away illusions and reconnect us with what is real. It was not just a physical act but a mental discipline. Choosing to be alone in silence was, for him, the first step toward freedom. Not the freedom to escape responsibility, but the freedom to choose how to live with intention and clarity. Solitude, when chosen with purpose, becomes a mirror. And in that reflection, we see not just the world, but our place within it. Viktor Frankl, turning isolation into meaning amidst adversity. Viktor Frankl survived one of the darkest chapters in human history. As a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps, he witnessed suffering that defies comprehension. Yet from that suffering, he developed one of the most profound psychological insights of the modern era. Frankl believed that even in the most brutal conditions, life can still hold meaning. And in that meaning, we find strength. Frankl wrote that everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. In solitude, especially when it is imposed by cruelty or crisis, this choice becomes vital. Isolation strips away distraction. What remains is the self. And it is there, in that stark aloneness, that the opportunity to find meaning emerges. For Frankl, meaning was not something abstract. It could be discovered in simple acts, remembering a loved one, imagining a future conversation, holding on to a personal belief. These were not fantasies. They were acts of defiance. In choosing to hold meaning, a person asserts their humanity in the face of dehumanization. Solitude in suffering, Frankl taught, is not an enemy. It is a crucible. It burns away illusion and forces us to look inward. This is not about pretending things are fine. It is about facing pain with intention. Asking not just why this is happening, but how we will respond. How we will remain human through it. Frankl's insight offers more than comfort. It offers power. Power to endure. Power to remain clear in chaos. Power to rise. Not because the world is kind, but because we have chosen to stand anyway. In solitude, we do not escape life. We confront it. And when we face it with meaning, we become unbreakable. Blaise Pascal, the root of misery, the inability to sit quietly alone. Blaise Pascal once wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from one thing: our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. At first glance, this might seem like an exaggeration. But Pascal was not speaking lightly. He believed that our constant need for distraction hides a deeper discomfort. We fear being alone not because of silence itself, but because of what it reveals. In solitude, we are faced with ourselves. No noise to drown out thought. No crowd to shape our opinions. No screens to numb our senses. Just us. Our questions. Our fears. Our unresolved emotions. This confrontation can be unsettling. And so, we run. We fill our days with activity and stimulation not out of purpose, but to avoid that stillness. The result is exhaustion without clarity, motion without direction. Pascal believed that this restlessness leads to much of our misery. We chase after pleasure, status, and noise not because they fulfill us, but because they shield us from the discomfort of inner stillness. We avoid the space where self-awareness grows. And in doing so, we avoid growth itself. Yet the ability to sit quietly alone is not a punishment. It is a skill. One that opens the door to deeper understanding and peace. In silence, we can observe our thoughts without judgment. We can notice patterns. We can ask why we feel what we feel. This is where emotional mastery begins. Not in control, but in awareness. Solitude creates the space for clarity. When we stop escaping ourselves, we can begin to know ourselves. And in that knowing, we find strength. We learn to think for ourselves, choose deliberately, and respond with intention. This is the root of freedom. Pascal reminds us that our discomfort with solitude is not a flaw, but a signal. It points to where we need to look. Sit with it. Listen. What feels unbearable may become the beginning of wisdom. Carl Jung, facing the inner darkness through silence. Carl Jung believed that within every person lies a hidden self, a part of us that we often ignore, suppress, or deny. He called it the shadow. It contains the thoughts, emotions, and impulses we find unacceptable or uncomfortable. Yet Jung argued that true self-understanding requires us to face this shadow, not avoid it. And the only place we can truly encounter it is in solitude. In silence, distractions fade. The noise of the external world grows distant. What remains is the quiet voice inside us, the one we usually drown out. Jung saw this as an opportunity, a chance to observe what we usually hide, to notice the feelings we suppress, to acknowledge parts of ourselves we reject. Facing the shadow is not easy. It requires courage and patience. It means seeing things in ourselves we would rather not see. But Jung believed that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. In solitude, we create space for this inner work. We are no longer performing for others. We are finally being honest with ourselves. Jung also taught that knowing our own darkness helps us understand the darkness in others. This empathy begins with self-awareness. When we recognize our own fears, weaknesses, and contradictions, we become more compassionate. We judge less. We listen more. Solitude becomes not a place of loneliness, but a laboratory for self-discovery. A space where we integrate what is hidden, where we begin to feel whole. Emotional mastery is born here, not from control, but from acceptance. We stop fighting ourselves. We start embracing the truth of who we are. The shadow is not our enemy. It is a part of us waiting to be seen. Silence allows it to speak. And if we are brave enough to listen, it can lead us toward healing, clarity, and a deeper sense of freedom. Jordan Peterson, Solitude as a Condition for Psychological Growth and Resilience. Jordan Peterson emphasizes that solitude is not simply a pause from the world but a foundation for personal strength. In his view, time alone is not wasted or passive. It is where identity is formed, thoughts are clarified, and emotional stability is developed. Without solitude, we remain entangled in the chaos of constant reaction. We become mirrors of others rather than creators of ourselves. Peterson warns that people who never spend time alone risk losing themselves. They drift from one influence to another, unsure of what they believe or who they are. Solitude provides the necessary distance to sort through this confusion. It allows us to examine our fears, doubts, and desires without external pressure. This inner confrontation is not comfortable, but it is essential, because it leads to psychological maturity. He teaches that character is not built in comfort but in challenge. Solitude presents a challenge that demands responsibility. No one is watching. No one is applauding. You are left with only your thoughts, your choices, and your truth. From that space, something stable begins to form. Not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to ask the right questions. Peterson also ties solitude to resilience. When we learn to stand alone, we become less fragile. We stop depending on approval to feel whole. We face discomfort and uncertainty with greater clarity. This does not make us cold. It makes us strong. strong enough to think independently, to act with purpose, and to carry the weight of our own life. Solitude is not a withdrawal from responsibility. It is training for it. In the quiet, we prepare ourselves to re-enter the world with intention. Not overwhelmed, but grounded. Not scattered, but clear. To build resilience, we must first face ourselves. And that begins in solitude. An invitation to practice stillness as an act of self-love. In a world driven by urgency and distraction, choosing stillness is a radical act. It is not withdrawal or weakness. It is a decision to reclaim your time, your thoughts, and your inner space. Stillness is where clarity begins. It is where you meet yourself without performance or pretense. Solitude offers something rare and valuable. It is not the absence of life but the presence of awareness. When you choose to sit in silence, you are not turning away from the world. You are turning toward your own center. That act is not selfish. It is essential. Practicing stillness is not always easy. You may encounter discomfort, restlessness, even fear. But those feelings are not signs of failure. They are signals. They show you where your attention has been scattered and where healing might begin. To remain present through them is to build resilience and clarity from within. This is not about avoiding life. It is about living more deliberately. When you give yourself moments of stillness, you make space to hear what matters. You learn to respond rather than react. You learn to lead yourself instead of being led by noise. So this is your invitation. Sit quietly. Breathe. Let the silence speak. In doing so, you affirm your own worth. And from that place, you begin to walk through the world with more strength, more intention, and more peace. Mastering emotions, do not react. Respond mindfully. Emotional mastery is not about suppressing how you feel. It is about understanding your emotions so clearly that they no longer control you. Stillness gives you the space to observe before you act. In that space lies freedom. The freedom to respond with clarity instead of being pulled by impulse. When you react instantly, your actions are driven by habit or fear. But when you pause, even for a few seconds, you create distance. That distance allows awareness to rise. You begin to notice the emotion, label it, and ask where it comes from. This is the first step toward mastery. You are no longer inside the emotion. You are witnessing it. Responding mindfully does not mean being passive. It means choosing your actions with purpose. It means asking yourself what serves your values rather than your ego. In that clarity, you shift from survival to intention, from chaos to calm. Solitude helps you practice this skill. It trains you to sit with your feelings without needing to fix or flee them. You learn to feel fully and still remain centered. Over time, this builds confidence and emotional resilience. You trust yourself more. You carry less tension. Mastery is not perfection. It is presence. It is the ability to stay grounded when emotions rise and to choose your next move with wisdom. That power lives within you. It grows in silence. Clear thinking in chaos, regaining decisiveness and inner freedom. In a noisy world, clarity is rare. Our minds are pulled in 100 directions, flooded with opinions, pressure, and fear. We lose the ability to think clearly not because we are weak, but because we are overwhelmed. To regain clarity, we must first create space. Solitude gives us that space. It is the clearing in the forest where thoughts can breathe. Clear thinking does not happen in panic. It comes in stillness. When you step back from the noise, you begin to see what truly matters. You can sort through confusion, discard what is irrelevant, and focus on what aligns with your values. This is not about avoiding hard choices. It is about making better ones. Decisiveness is not impulsive. It is built on calm awareness. It comes from knowing what you stand for. In solitude, you reconnect with that inner compass. You remember what is true for you. And from that place, you can act with confidence, not doubt. Inner freedom grows when we no longer feel controlled by chaos. When we trust our ability to pause, reflect, and decide, we stop being victims of circumstance. We become the authors of our actions. Stillness sharpens thought. Thought shapes choice. And choice defines who we become. Solitude is not an escape from life but a return to its essence. In stillness, we rediscover clarity, strength, and the quiet voice that knows who we are. When we dare to be alone, we no longer fear ourselves. We listen. We grow. And in that space, we begin to live, not by reaction, but by choice. Let solitude be your teacher. Let it guide you home.